Angela's desire to share health began with her work in respiratory therapy. But her passion began with her own journey.
Sorry.
Her own
I'm sorry, I could have
journey
been
from
distracted.
sickness
Probably to health.
to health. That's what we'll go with. Tonight, she hopes to share something. Angela's going to talk to us about health, and she's going to convince us that by eating the right kind of nutrition, it'll make our lives much, much better. Angela, come up.
Thanks. My journey from sickness back. And then tonight I hope to share with you a not-so-sweet truth, which I should have put that as my beginning title, but I did not, so I apologize, Rich. And what I did want to speak to you guys tonight about is health, and the fact that all of us have that ability to have health. It's really not based on our DNA. We can have a family history of cancer, we can have a family history of diabetes, but it really doesn't end there. Nutrition really is the key that turns on or off our DNA. And the more research we do along that line, the more we're finding that to be the case. Now, of course, nutrition is going to act differently in each one of us. I'm probably 15 years older than Emil, and even if we were equivalents physically, I'm sure that he could outdo me, even if we had the same nutritional base, because there's differences in us. Obviously, nutrition isn't going to help Rich grow his leg back, because nutrition doesn't do that. But nutrition does radically impact us, and that is my hope, is to share a little bit about a not-so-sweet truth with you tonight. So, of course, I'm going to be speaking along the lines of sugar. It is an addiction that we have as Americans in particular. It used to be that we consumed 5 pounds of sugar a year in the 1900s, and today we consume about 5 pounds of sugar a week on average. A child will consume about 32 teaspoons a day, the average child, and the average adult 22 teaspoons a day. So you can see how we are ending up with this diabetes issue with children today, and how it's such a great concern that Dr. Katz at Yale University, the head of prevention research there, says this is the first generation of children. He does not anticipate to have a longer life expectancy than their parents. They will live shorter lives. Every agency, whether it's diabetic, cardiac, cancer, all the associations say the same thing. We need to be eating more fruits and vegetables. That needs to be our base. But with our sugar consumption, this isn't so much the case, because fruits and vegetables aren't nearly as sweet as that tantalizing candy bar or that soda. One of the effects of sugar when we consume it is that it decreases our vitamin C. And the reason this is important is because our vitamin C is essential in creating white blood cells. It's one of the main nutrients used to create those white blood cells. If we don't have those white blood cells, obviously we're not able to combat all the bombardment that we receive on our systems, whether it's viruses or bacteria, fungus, whatever it is. Our white blood cells are not up to speed to do that. The hit that our immune system takes by just drinking one soda, it can be decreased for up to 6 hours. This is pretty critical, especially when this is one of the worst flu seasons we've had, one of the worst cold seasons that we've had. This is a very pivotal factor. It has its effect on our pancreas. Of course, our pancreas has to be producing more insulin to combat the blood sugar rush that happens when you consume sugar, especially the simple sugars, which are anything refined, white. The pancreas in rats has been shown to actually be enlarged when it is fed refined foods versus a non-refined diet. And that was only after 6 weeks of feeding them those refined foods. One of the biggest and most fascinating areas for me, though, is the homeostasis of the body in general. The homeostasis is a balance that we have to maintain in our systems. Every fluid in our body has a certain pH level that it needs to maintain. And when I worked in respiratory therapy, one of the ones that I always measured was arterial blood gases, and that was just blood from the artery. And when we would measure this, it always had to be between 7.35 and 7.45. Anything outside of that range was leading to death, either in an alkaline manner or an acidic manner. The reason I share all of that with you is because when we consume sugar, now sugar is the top one, but also protein and carbs in excess amount, well, even if you don't consume it in excess amount, but we tend to, what happens is our body burns the food that we consume, and that food leaves a residue or an ash that's left behind. And it's either alkaline or it's acidic. And we want it to be a balance, because if it's too alkaline, you end up with problems, and if it's too acidic, you end up with problems. Our sugar consumption has really increased to such a level that our bodies really remain in an acidic environment. Now there's two buffers that happen when we have high acid in our body. One is sodium, but not table salt sodium, sodium that's only found in fruits and vegetables. And the other is calcium. Now I have to tell you, we are the highest calcium consumers in the world, but we have the highest rate of osteoporosis. And that's where all of this comes back into play, in that when we consume the sugars in the quantities that we are creating that acid base. When we create that acid base, our body has to do something to bring us back into that homeostasis, that balance. And what it does is it draws from either the sodium or the calcium. Well, I already said we don't consume enough of the fruits and vegetables necessary, yet alone to combat the acidity in our bodies. So sodium's out, so that leaves us with the calcium. Well, we can't obviously get it from the pills that we're taking, because we still have the highest osteoporosis rate around. And we can't get it from the milk that we're consuming, because it's high protein content, so its ash is going to be left as acidic. So our body leaches calcium from our bones. So sugar has this broad range of ramifications. And I hope that just by getting a little bit of that information, it will inspire you to at least think when you're in the grocery store about, instead of grabbing those canned peaches, grab some fresh produce. Instead of, if you have to get the canned peaches for any reason, go for the ones that are in water versus the ones that are in a high syrup or heavy syrup. Go with a lighter syrup versus a heavy syrup. If you cut out one soda a day, because soda tends to be a more than once a day consumption for most Americans, you can lose 10 pounds in a year. You can, if you're baking something, you can cut a recipe by 1/3 of the sugar that you have in the recipe. So maybe this will give you some suggestions of different changes that you can make and ways to avoid that high sugar consumption to the degree that we are, because it's not so sweet. Mr. Joseph.